Welcome to Granny's Country Cooking, and I am Granny, and today we are going to be making chili. It is a meat dish that is usually spicy, has beans in it sometimes with just the meat, and we are going to have a fabulous time. First, I want to remind you to always have clean hands. Wash your hands. Then have an apron on so that you can play in the food and enjoy and not worry about your clothes. Also, if you have long hair, be sure and put it back so not to fall in the food. Okay, now first we're going to be deciding the size of pan that we're going to be making. If it's for one or two people for several days, the smaller size would be good. If you're going to be making a larger crowd for several people, I would go this size, and that's what we're going to do today is this size. Now, one reason why I like these pans, they are the cast iron. They're considered a Dutch oven, only they have a different lid, and they are coated with this coating. Now, that helps tremendously, but what you want is the thick, heavy pan. It tends to keep the meat from burning and all the flavors from getting scorched flavor. Then today we're going to be using this size pan, and it's the same type of pan. It is cast iron. It is heavy, very heavy, but it cooks very, very well. And it is the same kind that of the Dutch oven cast iron that you could use. I've decided to use this kind today, but I do use the Dutch oven, which is just the cast iron. So this is going to be great. Now we're going to be making this size. Now if I was going to be making the smaller size, I would use the small amount, about a pound or a pound and a half of meat. Today we're going to be using the larger size, so we're going to be using double that amount. This is probably about 3 pounds or so, 2 to 3 pounds. Now, a lot of people like to use what is called chili meat, and that is just fine. You cook it in the same way we're going to cook today. I just prefer to have the ground meat, and I like to have less fat, less grease in my chili. Now, I like to use, this is 93% lean. That means it's not going to be floating in grease. So we're going to be using this. Now also, this is a frozen package of meat. And yes, it will work. If you forget to set it out that morning when you go to work, don't worry about it, because you can put it in and slow cook it and steam it and get it all chopped up and it'll still work just fine. That's what we're going to do today. So we will be using that amount of meat. Then we're going to have approximately 2 small or 2 medium-sized onions chopped up. I have these already chopped up for us. Then I like to use, which you can use any kind of onions you want to, but I like the yellow sweet onions. They still have a tangy, oniony bite, but they're not a bitter bite. They have a sweeter flavor to them, and I like using the yellow sweet onions. Then we're going to be using garlic. This is what the garlic looks like whenever you buy it, and it's one round thing, one round deal. Now each one of these pieces is called a pod, and you pull them off, and then you peel that skin off, and then you chop it. Now in this larger pan we're going to be using 4 of these. I'll chop them in just a minute. We're also going to be having tomato sauce, and it depends on between 2 to 3 large cans of tomato sauce. We will check later to see how it's filling up. Then I like to use diced tomatoes with green chilies. It has a peppery flavor. I do use the mild. My husband and I like a milder taste, but we still like some of the hot peppery, I guess you might say. I also use chopped green chilies, and I do use the mild. We're also going to be using cumin, powdered cumin, then also regular salt and pepper. In a minute, we'll be moving to the stove, and I'll show you as we go along how we're cooking all of this slowly, one step at a time. Now, today, most people, like if you don't have beans already cooked, will use a can of pinto beans or black beans. Whatever type of beans you'd like to use, you add a can of beans. Today, what I have is beans that I'm created or made, cooked a while back, and we had some left over, so I put them in a Ziploc baggie and in the freezer. So we're going to be using home-cooked beans. Now, yes, I am going to have a program on how I love to cook beans, and we will do that another time. But I do have the home-cooked beans to go in the chili today. So, I also wanted to share about this little pan. Yes, you can use a thinner kind of pan. The only problem with a thinner pan is that it tends to burn or to scorch. So you have to be very careful and cook slower, which is fine. If this is the kind you want to use, that's fine. Don't worry about it a bit. Now you just cook a little slower. You don't want to scorch the onions or the meat, then you'd have a burnt flavor to your chili. So we are going to get started in just a minute. Going to chop some of these things up. We're going to move to the stove, and we will get started making our chili. Thank you. We'll be right back. Welcome to Granny's Country Cooking, and I am Granny, and today we are going to be making chili. It is a meat dish that is usually spicy, has beans in it sometimes with just has a lighter taste. It's not as heavy. So we're going to put approximately, let's say, 2 tablespoons of the corn oil, just a little bit. Then we're going to get a nice big spoon. This is our onions chopped up. We're going to turn our burner on. And we're going to turn it to a medium, not too high and not too low. Now we're going to put this all in. As you can see, I love my little antique pans, and many I've had from my family members that have passed them down. Other times I have found these little pans at garage sales. Absolutely love my antique pans. Now we're going to stir this around in the oil, and we are also going to add the garlic. As you can see, I have it chopped up small, and that is called minced garlic. It's minced, it's tiny, and that's what you want, and it's already chopped up. So we're going to scrape it in with the onions. The reason why I like to use fresh onions and fresh garlic, and yes, you can use the powdered seasonings if you don't have the fresh, and it will taste good. It really will. But the fresh has such a much better flavor to it. We'll set this over to the side, and we are going to more or less steam. Now what you want to do is to have this turn kind of a clearish, they say kind of a yellow clear color. You don't want to burn these, but you do want to steam them. We're going to put the lid on and let them steam, and then we're going to add the meat and the seasonings. So we are going to put our lid on, and we are going to let that steam, and we'll be right back with you. Thank you. Okay, I want you to see the onions. It's been a few minutes, and they have been steaming, and the onions are kind of a clearish. They look almost glazed, and they're a little bit kind of clear, and they're really, really soft. Now what this does is that it makes the onions and the garlic have a different flavor than if you add it after the meat is in there and they're not glazed like this. They're not cooked like this. This renders or makes a sweeter flavor to onions and to garlic cooked like this. That's why you see a lot of soups and a lot of cooking shows. They will have the onions cooked before they add the meat. It just has a totally different flavor, and it makes kind of a sweetish flavor. It's delicious. If you've ever not been a great onion eater, some people love raw onions where they have different, just bites into it. I'm not one of those, but I love onion rings. And onion rings are a cooked version of the same onion, just not fresh. Well, this is what happens with onion rings. This is what's happening is the onion is cooked and it has a sweeter flavor. So that's what we're doing right here. Now we're going to pause for a minute. I'm going to start putting the meat in, and we're going to let the meat start simmering in there with the onions. So we'll be right back. I'm fixing to put the frozen meat in. For those that are brand new cooks, you may not realize that you can use frozen hamburger meat. But you take the clear paper off, and you can wet the back under the faucet. Then you have a nice frozen piece of meat, and you put it down in your pan. You put your lid on, and you have your burner set real low, and you let it steam. And as it's starting to get unfrozen and it's starting to come together, it's on together, as it's starting to loosen up, then you can start stirring it and start letting it steam and get cooked in there. So we're going to be right back after the meat is doing a little bit more cooking, and loosening up. Okay, be right back. I just want to show you for a few minutes the meat as it's thawing in the pan. Is I've stood it up and I'm kind of scraping the hamburger meat, the ground beef as people would call it, and kind of scraping it and then letting it lay down. Remember, clean hands, getting it off the sides, and then we're going to put the lid back on, and it takes a few minutes to do this, but it's better than not having anything for supper at all. So go right ahead and get your frozen meat out, and you can make your chili or your soup, and don't worry about it. We're going to let this thaw a little bit more and be right back with you. Okay, our meat is completely cooked and steamed now. Now we're going to flavor it, and you can see that it's all in lumps, and it has the onions and the garlic cooked in there. And now we're going to be adding this seasoning. Now, I don't like to use a lot of heavy peppery things, but I do love to use the peppercorn pepper, and we will get the salt. Now we're going to pepper it a little bit. This gives it a little bit of a different peppery taste. This will season it a lot better, and you probably may want to add some more salt after a while, after it's ready to taste. But right now we're going to season it this way. We're going to add ground cumin. I like to buy in bulk supply because we live out in the country, and so I like to get large amounts. But if you live in the city, you can buy smaller amounts and not have to get such a big amount. This is ground comino. They are comino seeds, but this is ground seeds, which is it's like the ground powder. So we're going to sprinkle. This is about 1 tablespoon is all I'm going to use. It doesn't take a lot of the comino, the cumin. I'm going to turn the burner back on. I turned it off for a minute, and we are going to get this started. There's a little bit of black pepper in there. There is some of the ground cumin, and there is salt in there. We're going to stir this around and make sure our meat is really good and steamed and cooked, and it has all the onions and the garlic in it. Absolutely looks wonderful. this beautiful meat. I wish you could smell all this good smelling. It's wonderful. As you noticed while I've been cooking and steaming the meat, that I have a little bucket that I keep with soapy water with a little bit of bleach in it. And as things are steaming, that's when you can rinse up a few little things at a time, and you have them already washed and dried. By the time you're finished cooking, everything is almost already washed. It doesn't take very long to keep it all neat and out of the way. Okay, now we're going to add our tomato sauce. Now, this is just an idea. I don't know if many of you have ever thought about it, but when you get a can off of the shelf, it has a little bit of dust maybe on it. I always like to wipe the top of the cans. So we are going to add our tomato sauce. This is a large size. I do like to use large sizes. I do buy this in bulk also. Alright. Now, whenever, if you use the canned beans, you will also have juice from the beans. You want to make sure you get all of that good tomato sauce into there. And when I'm cooking, I kind of go by what it looks like too. So we're going to check to see if we're going to be using all 3 of these. Remember, we want to wipe the lids off, get the little dust particles off. If it's been in your pantry for a little while, you want to make sure you have all the dust off. It looks like we're going to be using the 3 cans here. Kind of takes, you might want to add a little bit more depending. This is a little bit smaller spoon, so I'll use it to get more of the tomato sauce out. Now the meat is slowly simmering. That's what you want. It's a slow bubble. You don't want it burning on the bottom. We're going to open this other can. I would love to have you smell this. It smells so good. I do use tomato sauce in many types of foods. Italian, or I love to cook Mexican flavored food. We here in West Texas, this is kind of a semi-arid area where we have a lot of wonderful Spanish restaurants and Mexican food, and it's called Tex-Mex a lot. A lot of you may realize that. And it does have some different seasonings from those that cook from the old Mexico way. It does have some different seasonings. Okay, here we are. We're going to be letting this cook. Now we're going to let this simmer. We're going to start adding, I like to add the little green chilies, and then we have our diced tomatoes and green chilies we're going to be adding. This is chopped green chilies, so we're going to add this. We're going to let this simmer for a few minutes, and we'll be right back with you. Thank you. Okay, we are going to add our little green chili can. Now you can buy this green chili in different mild, medium, hot, different flavors. My husband and I don't eat a lot of real peppery things because of our health, but we do like some flavor of some hot, peppery things. So this one is mild. We're going to add this into this. These are the mild green chilies. We're letting the meat simmer. We are going to be adding our beans, but I always like to have the meat really, really cooked before I add all the other things to it. And we're stirring. the tomato sauce, the green chilies in. As you can see, it's looking delicious. Now this is the hot diced tomatoes and green chilies. You can get this in mild, medium, and hot also. Now I don't use the whole can sometimes because it depends on, some cans are a little hotter than others. So I'm going to add about maybe a fourth of a can, between maybe a fourth and a third. We're going to get some of that juice. Sometimes it gets really, really too peppery for us. So I've added about a third of a can. I can always add more, but I can't take it out. So it's up to you. If you like it very, very peppery, then enjoy and add all you want. This is really going to be nice. Now we're going to let this simmer for probably, maybe it's awfully thick right now, but later when we add our beans, it'll add a little more juice to it and the bean flavor. So we're going to let this simmer for probably about maybe, let's say 20 minutes, and then we'll get back with you. Thank you. Okay, the meat has been simmering, and we have our tomato sauce and our tomatoes and chilies added in here. And let's taste it and see how it's coming along. This is a clean spoon. I'll pour it into here and then I'll taste it. Now this is where you can start adding more seasoning if you want it a little bit more flavorful. If you want it a little more peppery, or if you want it a little more, I'm going to add a little more comino, I think. So we're going to test it and to see how this is going to be. It's getting there, not quite. Now I'm going to add a little bit more of the comino powder, probably maybe, let's say about 1 more tablespoon. And yes, it will blend in. We're going to add just a teensy bit more salt. Now remember, depending on the kind of beans you add, if you want beans, it will also have some of the salt mixed with it. And so when it's in the can, they have it usually flavored with some salt. And we may want to add a little more liquid to this, but since the beans will have liquid from being homemade or from the can, we may not add it right now. We'll just wait and see. Now I want to taste this and see if I have enough. I might need a little more of the tomatoes and chilies to give a little peppery taste, a little more. So we're going to try it and see. Here's a clean spoon. We're going to put this in here. We're going to cool it down and taste it. And as you can see, it's starting to get really, really pretty color too. That is much better. And it's taking on a lot more of the onion and the garlic flavor. I'm going to be wanting to eat some here in just a minute. That's getting really, really good. And I can start to taste more of the peppery, so I may not add some more of the chilies because they do give more of a peppery. Now, my husband and I, health-wise, we cannot use some spices, and chili powder is one that we cannot use. You can use chili powder if you want. It's a delicious powder. I don't even have it in the house, but it's a good flavoring for chilies or whatever you want to use, soups, but we can't use it. So what I do is I use the comino and the other flavors to blend in, and I really don't even miss it. But the chili powder tends to hurt our stomachs a little more when there's a lot in there, so we just don't use it. But this is already starting to taste the really good Southwest, the really good, I guess you could say, Tex-Mex flavor if you want. So we're going to let this simmer for a little bit more, maybe another 5-10 minutes. And then we're going to add our beans. So we'll be right back with you. Thank you. Okay, we're back. I have added the frozen beans that I had in the deep freeze. And it was probably about half a bag, or maybe compared to 1 can of pinto beans. And they are in here simmering. And we're going to let them simmer a little bit longer. And in the meantime, I'm going to be getting out the cilantro. Now, cilantro gives it just a teensy bit of a good flavor. If you don't have any, it's okay. Cilantro is fresh. You can buy it in the near the vegetable section in your grocery store, and it will be near the old peppers and things like this. And it is a herb that is delicious. Now, this is going to simmer with the beans. You can see the beans in there. And they're going to be simmering for about 10 more minutes, and then we're going to taste it again and see. And then we'll have the cilantro ready to put in, and we're going to turn every burner off after this simmers, and we'll show you what comes up next. Okay, thank you. Back in just a minute. Okay, we are going to check the flavor and see what needs to be added to it a little bit more. And we're going to take our clean spoon and put it into this one. Remember, we have onions and garlic and meat and cumin, and we have the tomatoes and the chilies in here. The green chilies is a pepper. Okay, we're going to taste this. Okay, that is delicious, but remember, with some of the other videos, there's sometimes a little bit missing. This is 1/8 of a cup, and it's 1/2 of a cup of sugar. This is going to blend all of the flavor together. We are going to add that and let it cook for a while and let it simmer before we add our cilantro. We're going to let this blend. Now remember, if you have someone in your family or friends that are coming over that likes lots of pepper, like jalapenos and things like this, you can, and then you may have someone in your group that does not like peppery things. You can make it mild chili, and then at the table let them add more of the peppers that they like. And then that way everyone can enjoy it, and it won't be so peppery for some people. Now we're going to taste this with the sugar in just a second. And we're going to blend all that together. Okay. Let's get our clean spoon, and we're going to check that. And we're going to see what the sugar does. Perfect. Going to be good. All right, we will get back with you after it simmers for a little bit, maybe 10-15 minutes, and then we'll add the cilantro. Be back in just a minute. Thank you. Okay, we're back. Now this is the almost finished product. You have beans, and you have meat, and you have your sauce that is cooked into like a golden reddish brown, your tomatoes, your chilies in there. The burner is turned off, and now we're going to add cilantro. This is the way cilantro looks at the grocery store. We're going to, you can chop all of the little ends, you can use it in lots of ways. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a few of the tops of these, and we're going to kind of tear them apart a little bit. And we're going to sprinkle them around, and your fingers will have that delicious smell of cilantro. Oh, I love this. It has such a good flavor to it. And we're going to sprinkle it on the top. Now, we are not going to stir it in, because if it cooks too quickly, it looks like slimy spinach. So we're going to let it sit on top. We're going to add a little bit more. We get a few more little pieces here. It's a beautiful little plant. we're going to add this in. We'll take our spoon out, put this over there. We're going to put the lid on, and we're going to let it sit for about 30 minutes. And it will be delicious. That flavor, after it sits, it's called melding, I guess you could say. We're going to let it sit and kind of blend all the flavors together. Then we're going to serve a bowl of chili. So be back in just a minute. Okay, we are back, and our chili has been setting for about 30 minutes or more. The cilantro, when you take the lid off, you can see the beautiful cilantro is still there. After a little while, we'll stir it all in there. And you can see how beautiful that cilantro, and it brings that flavor all the way through. So now we are going to serve up a beautiful bowl of chili. So here we go. And I wish you were here right now so you could eat this with me. Thank you for being with us at Granny's Country Cooking. And here's our homemade chili. The next video is going to be jalapeno cornbread to go with this chili. So be sure and watch for that video to go with it. Thank you. Bye-bye.